cognitive dissonance of the left is really just mind-boggling.
The facts are that Nicolas Maduro is an authoritarian dictator. Yes, he rigged his elections. Venezuela's 2024 election was widely considered fraudulent. The opposition coalition won, according to independent exit polls and 80% of voting machines, but Maduro's electoral council declared him the winner without releasing detailed results, and protests to that were met with violent crackdowns. Yes, Maduro created an economic collapse and he was corrupt. Under Maduro's regime, Venezuela's economy contracted 75%, worse than the Great Depression, and created hyperinflation that reached 130,000%. And regime-connected elites profited from government contracts while regular Venezuelans starved. Yes, Maduro committed human rights abuses. The UN reports document his extrajudicial killings by security forces, torture of political prisoners, and forced disappearances. Maduro is responsible for immense human suffering, and I would never defend him. But the question that I have is, who the fuck made America the moral authority?
That's actually a really easy question to answer. We became the moral arbiters after the European powers drug the world into global conflicts twice in less than half of a century, killing tens of millions, causing untold economic damage, laying waste to historic cities, committing genocides and ethnic cleansings. After they did that twice, along with Japan, and we stepped in twice to put a stop to it, we became the moral arbiters after that second time. And you know what that has done, us being in charge? It has given liberal democracy to the entirety of Western Europe and parts of Eastern Europe at this point after the collapse of the Soviet bloc. It has given the people of Europe the most prosperous life that they have ever enjoyed. Beyond that, these are the same people that want us to play moral arbiter and world police in Ukraine and Russia right now. These are the same people that want us to send billions of dollars. They want us to continue the war with Russia for however long it takes, as long as Putin is defeated. For some reason, it's okay for them, okay with them if we play world police and we play moral arbiters in Europe, but not here in our own hemisphere, in a country that is, as he said, killing political dissidents, making people disappear, denying election results. He is a warlord, an illegitimate dictator. But God forbid we remove him.
Because Maduro may have rigged elections, but the U.S. systematically disenfranchised voters through gerrymandering.
Both sides have gerrymandered.
Voter ID laws.
Only people voter ID laws disenfranchise are people that are trying to fraudulently vote. So
Targeting minorities in the Electoral College that allows presidents to lose the popular vote by millions and still win.
Because we live in a republic, not a direct democracy, sir.
And Trump literally attempted a coup on January 6th.
He literally told his supporters to go march peacefully and protest.
Maduro's regime may have caused economic suffering, but the U.S. has the highest incarceration rate in the world. We've imprisoned millions of black and brown people for nonviolent drug offenses, while the private prison companies make billions of dollars off of the prison labor.
Yes, and largely due to Joe Biden's 94 crime bill that very directly targeted black and brown neighborhoods, specifically the men of those communities.
We have tent cities in every major city, while billionaires pay lower taxes than teachers.
Now, I can see both sides of the argument as far as the taxing goes. I can, there's the fact that these millionaires and billionaires pay like 60% of the taxes in the United States that are actually held, and something like the lowest 40% of Americans ultimately pay no tax after tax returns and beyond that, welfare programs, SNAP benefits, Medicaid, Medicare, things like that. In fact, most people that are in the lower 20%, if they have a child at least, end up getting more in benefits and tax return than they will ever pay into taxes.
Maduro may have committed human rights abuses, but our police kill over 1,000 people annually with minimal accountability.
Yes, and thankfully, most departments now have body cams, so we can generally see, how these shootings went down. And, it's a major pastime of mine watching, police videos. I grew up watching cops, and it always irritated me how you never saw the cop do anything wrong, and it was always justified, Thankfully, though, in the modern age with body cams, we can see and we can judge for ourselves. Was this justified? Was it not justified? This fella right here is the type to be like, oh, the police shot anybody, they're bad. This is the type of guy that probably would have went and rioted in Kenosha over the Jacob Blake shooting, even though that man had just sexually assaulted a woman and was attempting to kidnap a child while under the influence in a vehicle that wasn't his.
We've also separated children from parents at the border and lose track of thousands more families.
Yeah, the Democratic Party was doing that for the last 4 years and no one cared on your side. And now, if someone gets lost, it's a problem.
And I know many Venezuelans, especially those who fled Maduro's regime, are celebrating this. And I understand why. When you've lost family members to violence, when you've watched your country collapse, when you had to flee with nothing, of course you want that dictator gone. But I'm here to tell you the history. American military intervention doesn't lead to democracy, and it never has.
That is a blatant lie, as I've already said. After our intervention into the European conflicts of the early 1900s, liberal democracy spread all throughout Western Europe. The only places that we haven't been able to bring liberal democracy to just so happens to be countries full of Muslims.
In Iraq, Saddam was a brutal dictator. We removed him, but the result was 500,000 dead, ISIS was created, causing decades of violence, and Iraq still doesn't have a stable democracy. Libya, Gaddafi was dictator. NATO removed him. The result? Failed state, open-air slave markets, and an ongoing civil war. Afghanistan, 20 years of occupation, trillions of dollars spent, and the Taliban is back in motherfucking power.
See, I just said Muslims.
The people who will suffer most from this intervention aren't Maduro and his cronies. They'll flee to luxury in Cuba or Russia. It's regular Venezuelans who live through this bombing.
You mean like the 3-hour bombing that only hit military installations? Like, I haven't heard any civilians were killed. In fact, all I've heard from Venezuelan civilians is how happy they are that this has happened.
Destabilization and power vacuum and whatever extractive puppet government we install.
Yeah, and there was no power vacuum left. Like, they only took Maduro and his wife. They left the rest of the government there. The vice president is still there and is now in charge. And now it's up to them whether or not they want to play ball. They've seen what we can and will do. They understand our capabilities at this point. So, despite what she might be saying publicly, I think it's pretty likely that they're gonna get on board.
If we actually cared about democracy and human rights, we'd intervene in Saudi Arabia, our close ally that beheads dissidents, dismembers journalists, and commits genocide in Yemen with American weapons. We'd be intervening in Egypt, where our ally El-Sisi imprisons 60,000 political prisoners. But we don't, because they cooperate with American corporate interests. Venezuela's crime isn't being a dictatorship. It's being a dictatorship that won't let American companies extract their resources.
Oh, I see, sir. So you don't have a problem with U.S. military intervention and toppling governments. You just prefer that it was Middle Eastern governments. Makes sense, Why wouldn't we focus our military, our power, our time and effort on countries on the other side of the globe instead of worrying about countries here in our own backyard? If this guy really cared about any of the things that he's acting like he cares so much about, he would have said something about Haiti and the fact that has completely collapsed. That it has been under the control of a warlord who has reportedly engaged in cannibalism for the last 2 or 3 years. But he don't care. He don't care. Because that shit don't fit his political, agenda. Me, I would prefer that we remove the Venezuelan president and make sure that Russia and Iran and China don't have footholds here in our hemisphere, considering that these nations, Russia invaded Ukraine, China has 1 million Uyghur Muslims enslaved in the Xinjiang province, Iran is essentially collapsing because of popular uprising due to the fact that they live under a theocratic dictatorship. Why would we want an ally of those nations here on our side of the world? Why are Democrats so much more concerned about European nations and Middle Eastern nations than about American nations? I don't know if they forgot, but America isn't just the United States. In fact, there's a North and a South America. Tell me it doesn't make more sense to worry about the Americas than it does the old powers of Europe, the ancient powers of the Middle East. Please tell me why we shouldn't be more worried about Venezuela, a nation who, I might add, under Maduro, had been threatening to invade and annex Guyana for the past 4 or 5 years. Why should we let these places completely collapse here in our own backyard while we pour billions and use soldiers and all of our resources to guarantee peace on the other side of the planet? These folks have no problem with America playing global police or being the moral arbiter, as long as it's their morals that are being enforced. But I mean, it's just the same old democratic hypocrisy, you know? Can't get away from it. All you can do is call it out.